start? Because I know that Chris has to leave at 9. I don't know where that sound's coming from. Is anyone getting a weird echo there? Maybe that's just me. Great. Well, thanks for coming. My name is Bjorn, and I'm on the board along with Chris. I coach the 2013 boys white competitive team, and I'm also a ref. I've just been reffing for a couple of years at this point. And Chris, why don't you introduce yourself and let people know,
I coach the 2011 boys red team, and then I'm also the competitive coordinator currently on the board for the club. And I've been reffing on and off since 2011, just sort of depending on what else was going on.
Yeah, and I'm also the coach coordinator, which is, I don't know that has been a role that has done much in the past. I'm trying to do things that are useful to the coaches. Most of the coaches are not in the comp program for us. Most of the coaches are actually in the rec program. The way it works is sometimes coaches are in for a season, sometimes they're in for multiple seasons. But a lot of times those coaches don't have a deep background in soccer. They're doing it because someone said, hey, if you don't coach, your kid isn't going to have a team. So I wanted to do this session so that we could have a conversation about, how refs work in Alameda Soccer Club, and just to give some idea of what are things that refs want you to know, to give you a chance to ask some questions, talk about things that people probably don't get right about what the rules actually are. So Chris, why did you get into reffing in the first place? How did you come to become a ref?
Because there wasn't enough of them. And the games I was coaching weren't getting reffed, basically. So I made a deal with like a bunch of other coaches that we would cover each other's games, and that's sort of how I started getting refs on a regular basis, and then I just sort of started reffing more games from there, kind of thing.
And I think that's similar. I think that's how a lot of the Alameda Soccer Club refs become soccer club refs, is that I need people to cover my own games, and I can't depend on people just selecting games. So I'm similar to Chris in that I ref other people's games and I get them to ref mine. And that's how I got into it. And so what is the process to become a ref? You do an online course. I don't know how many hours it is. It's not too much.
I think it's supposed to be 4 to 6 hours, depending on how efficient you are.
Yeah. And then there's supposed to be a 3-hour on-field practical. I think ours was about an hour and a half. It was out at Hornet. The wind was blowing. It felt like it was about 22 degrees. So I think we cut it a little short. I don't know how useful the online practical or the practical was. But from then on, after you do that, you get your badge. There'll be a badge that you get in the mail, and you'll have to go get a shirt. The club will reimburse you to a certain extent if you ref a number of games, and then you're a ref. But that doesn't mean that your games are going to get picked up. You actually often have to go hunt to find refs. And so having someone on your club, like Kevin, his son is in my club, and so he's one of the other options. If we can't get a ref, like we couldn't a couple weeks ago, then Kevin ref the game, and I might ref the 2013 boys red game, and then they have someone who refs on their team, and so we'll swap and we'll move things around. Just to demystify a little bit about what is the process. The games are all available, and it's up to the refs to decide what games they cover. So the schedule is out already, and you can, if you're a ref, you can sign up for games. And different formats pay different amounts. Like a 7v7 game is only 55 minutes. and so it's less expensive. You get paid less for that game than you do for an 11v11 competitive match, which I think is like $50 or $55 or something like that.
They go up to $90 depending on the level of play and the level of the team. Yeah.
Yeah, but a rec team, a rec 7v7 game is paid the least of all the games because it's rec, so there's just a discount already for what is paid for those games, and then the length of the game makes it, you're working less, so you get paid less. And so, like for me, my wife's the team manager, I'm the coach. We're watching like a hawk to see if our games are getting picked up. The unfortunate thing is sometimes you don't know until Friday. A lot of times the games don't actually get claimed until Friday, which I wish that worked differently, but it doesn't. But Alameda Soccer Club doesn't tell refs what games they're going to work. It's up to the refs to decide which games they want to work, which came as a surprise to me as a coach, where it was like, okay, now you have to go find refs. I'm like, what do you mean I have to go find refs? Well, yeah, you do. It's not it's not provided for you. The opportunity for a ref to sign up for your game is provided, but there isn't anyone at Alameda Soccer Club that says, okay, we have 20 refs and we're going to assign them to these matches to make sure everything's covered. It doesn't work that way. And sometimes the refs who may be reffing your game, they don't really have a connection to Alameda Soccer Club at all. They may just be in the pool and they decided that they wanted to ref that game because it was convenient, because it was the level that they wanted, because it was the time that worked for them, whatever it is. So that's just something to know about how that, a little bit behind the scenes of how games are actually scheduled. And so the question that you get from a lot of rec coaches is, well, what happens if I don't have a ref? And that's why in your coach bag you should have a whistle because it might be you. And that matters a lot less in the rec context than it does in the comp context. In the comp context, we have to have a ref where the game can be protested and we can be fined. Or there was something in email that just came out a few weeks ago about the game won't count if you don't have a ref and will be played again at the home team's expense. So that's great. So Chris, from the ref perspective, what are a few things that you wish that coaches knew?
That's we're doing our best. Like the refs aren't. Like this past weekend, I was doing a game, and the refs were convinced that it was a non-Alameda club, and the visiting team was convinced we were all in for the home team. And it's another club that I don't do anything for beyond like reffing the game because it was a good paying game and it fit in with my schedule kind of thing. Like the refs could care less who wins the game. For them, like I've never seen a ref care about the winner. Like at least at the younger ages, I'm more there like to help the kids learn the game and understand it. So like sort of talking to them on the field, I'm not going to call every little push and stuff. Keep the game flowing more than in a U10 game, you could probably blow the whistle every 2 minutes if you really wanted to, kind of thing. But that's not going to be fun for the kids. So I guess that's sort of just off the top of my head.
It's actually a rule that if you make a call, you can't change the call. No ref gets talked out of making a call. Once the call is made, the call is made. And I've had a situation where, in 7v7, you don't have assistant referees. You're the only one. And I mean, am I going to get every call? No, I'm not going to have every angle completely correct. But I had a situation where the ball went out. I called a throw one way, and the other coach is like, I saw it. It was the other way. I can't do anything about it at that point. The ship has sailed. It is out of the gate. So once I've made a call, it's actually illegal for me to change the call, which people might not understand. The other thing is people don't understand the handball rule. Not every time the ball touches your hand is it a handball. And not every handball is going to be seen. Just because even if the player just stops running because he thinks it's a handball, if I don't see it, I'm not going to call it. And so not every handball, not every time the ball touches your hand is it a handball, and not every time Tommy or Jane fall to the ground is it a foul. It's especially you have a kid who outweighs another kid by half, and they go shoulder to shoulder, and the smaller kid falls to the ground. Doesn't necessarily mean it's a foul. So it is a contact sport. And pushing actually isn't illegal. So there's nothing that says pushing is illegal. It's up to the referee to determine if the push is careless, reckless, or performed with excessive force. That's when it's illegal. It's just to push someone isn't illegal. And one thing you can do in your practices and with your teams is when they start saying this is a foul and that's a foul, you correct them, tell them, actually shoulder to shoulder challenge is completely okay. This is a contact sport. Not everything's a foul. And also tell that to your parents, because the number of times, a player goes down to the ground, and even if it's like two kids who are kicking the ball at the same time and one of them falls to the ground, the cries from the crowd that this was actually a foul, you do hear that. And it's not a foul. Another thing to know as coaches and assistant coaches, and something to tell your parents, is you should never come onto the field unless you are invited onto the field. So you have a kid who's down and crying, you get the attention of the ref and you say, "Can I come onto the field?" Usually they'll turn and look at you and wave you on, but don't run onto the field. That is a thing that will get the club suspended. It could get you suspended. It could get you ejected. The club's already on probation, mostly through no fault of our own. But that's just a simple thing that if you know that, don't do that, because you can get not only yourself and your team, but the whole club in trouble for that. Are there any other things that you see out there, Chris, that you would want coaches to be thinking about?
I would really encourage coaches to talk to their parents if their parents are successfully coaching the team, and a lot of sometimes the parents are really intense at like a U12 game, U10 game, and just encourage your parents to relax sometimes and enjoy the kids playing. Not really towards the refs too much, but sometimes it seems a little over the top from a ref's perspective.
Yeah. And if your parents are getting out of hand, what should happen from there is not that the ref won't pick the parent out. The ref will talk to the coach and say, you need to get that parent under control. And if they don't, it isn't the parent that gets the card, it's the coach. And if the coach continues to not get them out of under control, you will eject the coach. The coach will get a red card. And then you have to figure out if someone else has a player pass, an assistant coach, a manager. Because if there's no one on the sideline that has a pass to be there, that game is over. And I mean, first of all, none of these kids are going to be the next Messi. We should be having fun, right? And second, that just ruins the whole experience for your kid. So it is the coach's responsibility to maintain order on the sideline. How many yellow or red cards do you give out, Chris? Have you given out a red card yet?
I've given out probably 2 red cards since 2011. One was for a kid spitting directly at another kid that I saw. It was pretty easy, and the other red was 2 cautions. So it wasn't usually not too bad.
Yeah, I've only had to break out 3 yellow cards so far. 2 of them were to ASC players, and 1 was to an opposing coach. I think it was the one who argued with me on the sideline. He kept on arguing about other things, and I warned him, and finally I gave him a yellow, and that ended that. But I love ASC, but the 2 yellow to players were both to ASC players, and they just kicked players. They got beat, and they just kicked them. And it's an opportunity to give them a yellow, but to say like, hey, that's not part of it. I love the sort of the teaching aspect. That's why I think I like reffing the younger kids, because you get to give them little jokes in the warm up. I have, and I'm there trying to help them as well. I'm not giving them pointers in the game, right? It's about the rules, but I enjoy that. What's the difference moving up, Chris? Like, what are those older kid games like?
It's very dependent from team to team and sort of the culture the culture the coach sets on the sidelines. Like a lot of if the coach is yelling at the ref a lot, the players will start to pick up on it and start yelling at the ref and stuff too. Usually with those kids, I'll try and talk to the kids more, and let them know what I'm seeing too, and just sort of narrate a little bit here and there if I'm not liking something, tell them about it before necessarily blowing the whistle kind of thing, unless it's egregious.
Yeah. It's important to also note that referees are all very different too. I mean, I ref my games probably very differently from how some others ref. Some hardly blow the whistle at all, and sometimes that works. Works at some formats. Some kids are really young. I mean, you can be 14 years old to be a ref, and we have 14-year-olds out reffing games. So if we want to have more refs, if we want to not have to scramble to get your game covered, then we really need to encourage those young refs so they stick with it. As your players are learning to play, those young refs are also learning to ref. So its development is happening on multiple levels, and not just the young refs, but someone who's come in as a parent to ref for their team. Maybe they've only reffed 2 games before. Maybe they've only reffed 3. So they're learning how to ref as well. So there's a lot of learning that's going on, even for the refs. So keep that in mind if the call gets blown. One thing I've noticed is let's talk about throw-ins a little bit, because throw-ins are one of those things where like kids are always lifting their back foot. And, there's all sorts of things that my kids get called on for fouls. And at rec, that usually is just like, let's just do it again. But as you move up, that tends to be less and less the case. And I've had tournaments where like a single, that foot comes off a half inch and they're calling it. The thing, if the rule is actually very different from what actually has become common to call. So I've had players called when they release the ball in front of them and sort of put it into the ground. There's actually nothing illegal about that, as long as it goes over the head to begin with. However, if that gets called, that's the way that game is going to get called. And you can have a conversation with the ref afterwards about maybe, look at the rule, but you can't argue with them in the game. So even if there's something that you think isn't being done right, you still have to let them ref the game. They should ref it equally, both sides, but you just can't argue calls. The call is the call. Bite your tongue. And I'll also notice that I have to keep an eye on my kids too when I'm coaching, because some will, it's the sort of the NBA attitude, or you see it on games, the Prem players, and when they surround the refs and start yelling and shouting. The sooner you cut that out, the less you have to repeat yourself. That, hey, we're not saying anything about the call. We're not saying anything about that at all. So I would encourage you to be vocal about not criticizing the call. Usually the criticism comes when you're losing. Right? So if your team wins, if you win 4-2, you forget all the calls that didn't go your way, and it tends to be the team that lost that had the 2 that really has a hard time with it. And that's worth pointing out every once in a while too. It's like, well, we didn't lose by a goal or whatever. So the kids will reflect how you treat the officials as well. So, all right. So at this point, and Chris has 3 minutes, I believe. Are there questions that you guys have about things that you've seen on the field, or questions you have about rules or anything else?
Yes, I do.
Great.
So this mainly stems from the last several games that I've been coaching. I coached 2 teams, a U14 girls and a U11 boys. And I want to kind of touch back on the pushing rules, because during both of those games, there was an excessive amount of pushing from the other teams, where the pushing was not playing the ball. They were just going to the player and giving them a shove off the ball and then taking the ball. And that was happening a fair amount. I just want to make sure I'm understanding completely of the shoulder-to-shoulder rule.
Yeah, I mean, you can't come in with a raised elbow and hit someone, but can you push them off the ball? Yeah.
The main reason I'm asking, because I grew up in Scotland and England, those rules have changed over the last decade to be more favorable of the pushing. Because growing up, it was always you had to play the ball first before you could push a player.
There's nothing that says that in the rules. That's not actually part of it, as I understand it. And Chris, if you disagree, let me know.
Because if that truly is the rule, that we can push at any time, then that completely changes the game I grew up playing. And that's also part of the reason why I'm trying to clarify this. That's why I'm here, because it sounds a lot like it's hockey rules as opposed to soccer rules. Because hockey, you can hit anybody that has the puck. But in soccer, you can't just run up to someone and shove them right off the ball when they're on the ball.
If you're shoulder to shoulder with them, you can absolutely shove them off the ball. You can't shove them in the back. Shoving in the back is never part of the game, and that is a foul. But shoving, I mean, it's a very effective way. I'll read a thing to you. I have a piece that I copied from there's a guy on this, like, I don't know, soccer parent soccer Facebook page, and he does these referee fireside chats, and he says charging is right up there with one of the most misunderstood laws in soccer. Before this conversation gets underway, it's important to note this: playing the ball is not an element or a consideration for fair charge. The only consideration related to that statement is whether the ball was within playing distance of the ball or not. The argument of player didn't play the ball is not a valid argument unless it's in the context of a potential denial of a goal scoring opportunity moment in the box. When a tough charge happens, it's almost guaranteed the place is about to erupt in anger from parents, coaches, and teammates. However, there are very specific things referees are looking for when determining when a charge is fair or not. Consequently, this is also one of the toughest decisions a referee can make in a split second. A charge is defined by IFAB, that's the governing body, as a physical challenge against an opponent, usually using the shoulder and upper arm, which is kept close to the body. You may not realize it, but charges happen hundreds of times per game. It can be as simple as a gentle bump of your opponent off the ball, up to both opponents running full speed when the challenge is made. The size difference of players is not a consideration for a fair charge. Simply put, There are very large size differences in players, and we cannot punish someone for simply being larger than the opponent. Referees should be looking for these general factors when a fair charge is being considered. Is the charge shoulder to shoulder? Are opponent's arms close to their body when the challenge starts? Is the opponent using careless, reckless, or excessive force? So, and it says with these factors in mind, it's important to note there is a lot of nuance. It is perfectly natural for players to lean slightly into challenges, but we usually want the players to be as straight as possible. The slight lean does not automatically equal a foul. Regarding the opponent's arms, we are looking for their arms for where the arm is located when the challenge starts and not when it ends. That's an extremely important factor. It is completely natural for arms to come up as the players bounce off each other, but most people do not see where the arm was when the challenge was initiated. Instead, most people see it after the fact. So, yeah, there's a lot of nuance there, right?
But yeah, well, I'm referring to when they're leaning into, like, they're really going in with a lean to knock them off the ball. So that's.
But if it's shoulder to shoulder, it's completely fine. So, and that's a thing that is, if there's something that gets people riled up, it's either the handball or the shoulder to shoulder challenge. Yeah. A shoulder to shoulder challenge is fine. If you called every time a player bumped into you, there'd be no game. You'd be blowing the whistle, every.
I think Bjorn, like, I think some of that comes down to, like, if a ref thinks it's careless or reckless too, like, depending on how hard the player, if a player is sprinting in full speed and just knocks another player, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
If they're shoulder to shoulder kind of thing. So how hard they do come into the challenge and how in control of their body they are matters too.
Which is where it comes back to that careless, reckless, or excessive force. So, and that is, what does that mean? Well, it's a completely subjective thing, right? So, and some people might have a hair trigger on that, and other people are going to be much more lenient. Yeah, I mean, it would be almost impossible to keep that from happening. Do you know what I mean? It is a contact sport. I mean, if someone is like running in and they just level someone, that's going to be reckless and excessive force, and that's going to be a foul. But two players who come together, and can you shoulder someone off the ball? Absolutely, you
can. There is Bjorn. Also, it's used to be called like the obstruction charge, and I think it's now called impeding. So if you're pushing someone and not have the ball actually within sort of reach of play, then you can call the impeding foul.
Yeah, and they talked a little bit about like being having the ball within playing distance. Yeah. I don't know if that was a satisfactory answer. It doesn't seem like it maybe was, but
no, it does. That helps a lot. It helps a lot because I knew that for the most part, because the other excessive pushing that I was referring to, the arms were extended and players were just clotheslining as they're trying to get up to the ball type defense, and I already knew that wasn't the case. I just wanted to clarify the shoulder to shoulder part. So
with something like the arms up, depending on like how much it's happening in the game, and if both teams are doing it, if it's not too physical, and if it's a rec game, I wouldn't be blowing the whistle every time that's happening. If it's pretty even both ways, like this past weekend, both teams were sort of, it was an older, higher level game. Both teams were sort of doing, grabbing at each other a little bit. It was happening almost every play. We're not going to call that every play kind of thing. We talked to them a little bit, but if one team is doing it one way and it's excessive, I would be more likely to call that kind of thing.
Yeah. All right. Are there any other questions?
Bjorn, seeing as you brought it up, could you go over the handball rule?
Yeah. So handball, if the ball bounces off your knee, if it hits a body part and hits your hand, it's not a handball. It's only called if you score immediately after that. So if the attacking team is coming and they receive a pass and it comes off their knee and hits their arm and it hits the ground and they strike it and that's the goal, that's going to be a handball. If that same thing happens, and they get control of the ball and they change over to the other side and there's another pass and then they score, it's not a handball. Is that confusing enough? So that's it. What you see so often is the ball bounces up and it hits a hand and everyone's like, handball. Not necessarily. So
what about the protecting of the face with the hands?
I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't. If you do that, I would call that a natural position.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think I'd call it if you are keep trying to keep your hand from or keeping the ball from putting your eye out.
My teammate on my college team, he got a red card for that.
Yeah, I was gonna say it depends on the level of play, probably.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was clear the ball was going to hit his face, but the ref still gave him a red card.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Those refs were awful. I'm not
under
going to talk
11.
about them.
Yeah,
I'm under 11, so that's a different thing.
We still have kids that like inadvertently like volleyball spike it every once in a while. Just like it's just a reflex and they can't stop it. They don't even know they're doing it. They just reach out and swat the ball down. That's going to be a handball. But the gaining advantage thing that I've heard isn't really part of the rule. So if it's inadvertent, and it is removed from the from immediately resulting in a goal, it's generally not going to be a handball. It's going to be very, very tempting to yell handball. You're going to do it. You're going to yell handball, but it's probably not a handball. Especially like when we're talking about lower level teams and rec teams where like, we're not always sure where the feet and legs are. And that ball just is going to come off at a weird angle and it's going to hit an arm. That's not a handball. And then also when we're talking about what part of what actually is a handball, it's below the sleeve is generally where we consider it. So this isn't a handball either. If the ball hits right here, if I put it into the net right here, it's not a handball, even if it's my shoulder. So I don't know if that helped clarify anything or not, but. All right. Are there any other questions? I know that we're going to lose Chris here, who has way more roughing experience than I do. So he's more valuable at this than I am. Great. Well, yeah, if you have questions, you can send.
I actually have a question here. I'm going to turn my camera back on.
Yeah, go for it.
So one thing that drives me bananas and the coaches as well is you don't have a list of refs. Like back in the day when I first started being the rec coordinator, and I'm starting my 5th year now, we actually had a list of refs, and they were the adult refs, but our coaches could call on them. But that sort of system has gone away. And are we ever going to come back to something like that, or no, we're not?
What ended up happening with that, it was a decision to cut the list away, is refs were getting calls from random, like the guidance was reach out to people that have a license.
Right.
And, refs were getting like 10 messages on a Friday night, and they were getting cold calls from half of the Alameda Soccer Club.
Yeah.
And so it just was not a sustainable. We were pissing off more people.
Right.
Like we were making more fires than we were putting out, kind of thing, with the list.
So I'll tell you what we're trying to do, and what we just started. We just started a WhatsApp group for ASC refs, and it doesn't have everyone in it yet. And we have 13 people in there, I think. But what I want to do is get ASC refs in there so that we can at least talk to each other. Because we have someone who's the ref, who's sort of has the ref hat on the board, but he's the assigner for Jack London. So if you request a game, he will say approved, but he does not see his job as going out to make sure the games are covered. So that is going to fall to the referees and the coaches and the managers. And so I'm trying, the WhatsApp group is an attempt to start to create a little bit of community, to bring in people that have refed, that need to get recertified, that, a place to ask questions, a place to do some education, some socializing, because we don't really have a ref community right now. It's a bunch of absolute individuals who work as independent contractors who are completely unrelated in many ways to what's happening. So that's something that I'm trying to do. We'll see if it works. But yeah, it's a challenge. Right now, it's like everyone has their own networks of, like I know like 4 people who ref, and
or they don't. Yeah.
Right. Or you don't,
Yeah.
and especially
Yeah.
if you're a new rec coach and this is your first season, you don't know anyone who refs, and you don't have time to get someone in to be a ref, because the on-field practicals are physical meetings that are scheduled, and there's like 2 a year or 3 a year or something like that.
Right.
So by the time by the time you find out you need someone to ref on your team, it's too late to actually make it happen. So that's a real challenge. And the WhatsApp group is an attempt to work towards something there, but
Well, thank you for doing that, because
Yeah.
I think that's a great step in the right direction.
We have to do something, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we hear about the ref shortage, and it's not here; it's everywhere. I found a video that was about like parents. What can you do as a parent? And one of them was like, we have a ref shortage, and you need to be nicer to the refs. Basically, that was 7 years ago. Nothing's changed. It's actually gotten worse. So encourage people to ref. Encourage a parent on your team to ref. If you're gonna be a coach for years, get certified yourself, because then at least you can trade. You can say, hey, I'll ref your game, you ref mine. And get a parent like Kevin, thank you for getting certified from my team. But that's the way it's happening right now, is kind of this like trading favors for each other. And I'll try to do some rec games, because a lot of times those rec games don't get covered, and I think that's kind of a bummer. So I'll try to do some rec games just so someone has a ref, so it isn't a parent all the time. But yeah, it's kind of what it looks like.
Yeah, the youth refs have been super helpful. That's really nice, and there seems to be more and more. Yeah, it's just a matter of getting parents, coaches, players to to treat them nicely, so that they keep coming back.
Yeah. It's very easy to assume that like, oh, well, this is a professional, I'm paying my money and I'm going to have my games ref. Not really. It doesn't really work out that way. There are things you can do. One, say thank you to the refs after the game. Let them know that you appreciated them. You don't have to tell me that, but tell Kevin that, or Chris, or whoever it is. Scott McCaskill refed, I don't know how many games last year. He did like 40 or 50 or something like that. I don't know. I did like 13 or 14 last season. But there are some people that bear a lot of the weight of the reffing. It's good to spread around. It'd be great if we didn't have to worry about that, but we do. And so there are things we can do to work on that.
Earlier you were talking about how you don't overturn, the CR doesn't overturn their calls, but I wanted to say this past weekend, Chris was the AR at my son's game. It's the highest, it's the 05 comp team.
Yeah.
It's the highest level one we have. And Chris saw the call in the box, but the CR called it differently. And anyway, CR ran over to Chris and asked, confirmed with Chris what he saw, and he actually changed the call.
Yeah,
So,
that's the only time that'll happen. It's not going to
Right.
be because the coach or the parent yelled something.
Yeah,
If you
right.
have ARs, then the AR can have a conversation with the central referee. AR is assistant referee. We used to call them linesmen, but that's not inclusive. So it's assistant referee now.
Right.
And so the AR can have that conversation, and that's the only time that you can overturn a call. But it isn't if I call, and when you're dealing with like something like offsides, in a 7v7 game, there's just one. You don't have an AR, so you have to do it yourself. There are times where out at Atlantic right now, that field on the far corner of the 7v7 field, there's a bunch of white flowers. You can't see the line where the ball goes out. So if I'm not perfectly calling that, like I'm doing the best I can, and just understanding that these people are doing the best they can. I'm trying to be impartial. I'm probably trying to be. I probably call Alameda a little tighter because I don't want to be accused of being impartial. We're doing the best we can. So that's just cut everyone some slack. That's really it. All right. Well, hey, thank you. And thanks for the questions. Thanks for coming and being part of this. This will be a recording that we will make available to, to other coaches, and hopefully it's a resource going forward. We don't even have to do this again because we already did it. We'll just show them this, and hopefully this is helpful. So that's it. Thanks for coming.
Well, thank you.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Appreciate all the refs out there.